Next, we have a presentation by Jack Dash. Jack will be giving an overview of a new feature on the AZNPS website called the Plant List. And so Jack is a naturalist and writer based in Tucson, Arizona. He works as a horticulturalist with the Arizona Sonora Desert Museum, where he oversees the cactus, agave, mountain woodland, and grassland gardens. He is also the president of the Tucson chapter of the Arizona Native Plant Society. Jack has worked since 2017 on a flora of the Atascosa Highlands in the southeastern Arizona and is co-creator of the multidisciplinary digital archive called Atascosa Borderlands. So thank you very much, Jack, for joining us.
Hi, thanks so much for having me here today. I really appreciate it, and I will keep this presentation fairly brief. One thing I would like to say before we begin is that in this brief show and tell, we're just going to kind of show you the plant list on the website and give you a sense for how best to utilize it and describe a couple of the needs that we have to finish our plant list project. There will be a panel later at 1:10 to 2 o'clock where folks can ask questions about native plants. So if you do have questions, let's keep them restricted to just the website, and then we can talk about native plants a little bit later here. So the best way to get to the plant list is simply to visit AZNPS.com, the Arizona Native Plant Society website. When you get there, there's multiple ways to find your way to the plant list. You can go to the plants, and the drop-down menu will have the plant list along with a lot of other great pages to visit. You can also visit our Grow Native tab, and that drop-down will have the plant list, as well as some other resources. You can ask a plant nerd. Those questions go to us nerds, and we'll try to answer them for you. We also have our Native Landscaping Partners tab, which will help you find, hopefully, nurseries or native plant providers in your area. And then finally, right here at the top of the page, we have the plant list. So our ultimate goal in kind of our first phase with this plant list is to have 250 species represented. As you can see, we're not quite there yet. We're at 132. We actually have descriptions written up for all 250 species. Currently, our bottleneck is a paucity of photographs of these plants in gardens. So of course, through SciNet, iNaturalist, or through our incredible Native Plant Society network, we have access to so many photos of these plants in habitat, but it can be more difficult to find photographs in landscape settings. So we are going to work on putting together a list of what plants we still need photographs for, and we can send those out to the society as a whole. We would love for this list to really involve a lot of contribution and buy-in from Native Plant Society members. So if you're growing some of these plants, that we will put out that list. And if you're growing them in your landscape or know a public garden where they might be, please do take photos and send them in. We're happy to credit the photographers, and it will help us reach that 250 plant goal. Before I dive in a little bit more to how to use the list, I'll also just describe why it's so important for us to have this list. Currently, the native plant list here is the most used, most viewed portion of our website. I recently received from our excellent board member, Diane Kelly, our sort of list of the views on the website. And at this point, the plant list is making up fully half of our views. So in 1 week, we had over 1,000 views on the plant list. And this is great. It brings people to the website. It establishes the Arizona Native Plant Society as a resource and an authority on gardening with native plant species, which I think is important. And additionally, it's going to create a better way for people to find our website. So the more that people utilize the plant list and they look for jojoba or desert willow or, narrow leaf wolfberry, when they Google those plants, our website will be one of the things that shows up. And so it's another way to take people who might not be familiar with the Arizona Native Plant Society onto our website, which will allow them to be exposed to all the great resources that we have available. and hopefully continue to build our membership, which is, obviously really important to keeping the lights on and making sure we can continue doing these conferences in the future. So looking more closely at the list, there's a few different ways that you can search it. Probably the most common way that people will search it is simply, annuals, cacti, grass, perennial, shrubs, succulents. We agonized a little bit about these categories because it can be difficult to figure out what's the most convenient way. Some plants might sort of straddle the line between shrub and tree. So to some extent, for some of these plants, we kind of just had to take our best guess at it. But I think it does give people a good way. Are they looking for a short-lived wildflower for their garden? Are they looking for a large shade tree? Additionally, you can look up by a number of other sort of requirements or categories. So sun exposure, as all of us from Arizona know, this is very arbitrary or really depends quite a bit. So again, we kind of just have to take our best stab at it. We really want to make sure that the plants we're describing as full sun are plants that we're confident can take the really harsh conditions that we have here in Arizona. Of course, it is really important to remember that full sun in Tucson and full sun in Flagstaff can be kind of two different things. But hopefully that's, I think that is helpful. And I think that's one of the big questions people have about any native plant. Water requirements. Again, this is one of those categories that it really depends on where you are. A plant might require less water in one city or town and more water in another, just based on elevation, things, heat, things like that. And then pollinators. And this is one of the other really big questions we get about these native plants. And one of the really big sort of messages that we want to impart about why it's important to landscape with native plants. They don't exist in isolation. They aren't something that's cut off from the ecology of our larger region. We really want to present these native plants as part of the equation for building functioning ecosystems on a micro scale, in an individual yard, on a slightly larger scale in neighborhoods or whole cities, and then on this larger regional scale that, really all of our cities and towns are connected by these ecological corridors and networks of plants. So that's a few of the main sort of searchable categories that we have here. Now, when you click on a plant, let's just take Anderson's wolfberry here. Again, you can see that for plant type, we list a couple of different categories. It's a shrub and a perennial. It lives for multiple years. Currently, all the plants are native to Arizona, except I do think from our old plant list, we might have Hesperalo, which is a popular landscaping plant across the state, not native to Arizona. So pretty much everything on this list is going to say, yes, native to Arizona. There is always the possibility that at some point we could include plants that aren't necessarily native to Arizona, but are widespread in landscaping here. And that's something we may consider, though I think for the moment, we really want our focus to be plants that you'll find in the state of Arizona. Again, you'll find water needs, sun, pollinators, and then we, have a number of other categories here. Does it have spines? As someone who has worked in the horticulture and landscaping trade, this is a very frequent question. We also will put size, which, you kind of just take your best guess at an average size. Of course, plants can vary quite a bit depending on how much water they're getting or what conditions they're in. Freeze tolerance. This is important because this list is meant to capture a snapshot of plants from around the whole state. And so not every plant on this list will be appropriate for everybody. Our goal is to kind of really take a broad sort of universal approach and try and represent all regions of the state. It means there will be some plants that are unfortunately left out. But our goal is really to let people know, here are the plants that will work for your area. Flowering season. This is really important to understand if you want to plan a landscape around providing pollen and nectar for pollinators throughout the year. Flower color, sort of minimum temperature ranges, the leaf descriptions. In this case, I would call a wolfberry sort of semi-succulent because of the sort of waxy cuticle on the leaves. fruits. And then I think one of our best features that we really have is we link to SciNet. So I'm sure most of us are familiar with SciNet. If you are not, you should familiarize yourself. It's an absolute gold mine of information for the plants of the Southwest as a whole. So if you click on this, it'll take you directly to the SciNet description for the plant. If you click on this, it will take you to the range map. This is really important for deciding if this plant's going to be appropriate for your landscape. You can get a sense for if it's part of the ecology of your locality. Elevational range, and then we tried to include a little ethnobotany. We obviously have to be somewhat careful here because we are not presenting ourselves as ethnobotany experts. There are incredible resources, such as our previous speaker, Wendy Hodgson's book, Edible Plants of the Sonoran Desert. But we do want to, I think that's an entryway for a lot of people into utilizing these native plants. So we did want to include some information, but take it all with a grain of salt, and a just larger description of the plant. So this is kind of meant to entice and excite people and get them thinking about ways that they could utilize these plants. I'll say for my own purpose, I would love to include another section of this plant list that sort of represents different guilds, or if you will, starter packs. So, present 10 plants that are kind of representative of these different categories that could be good for landscapes around this state. So say you could have a butterfly list, a hummingbird list, things like that. So that's kind of something that's maybe in the pipeline. And then I'm going to wrap up here, but just briefly, again, I would like to put out the message that we are going to be asking for photos from our Native Plant Society members. So please keep an eye out for that list. And if you do have photos of these plants in your landscape, please do feel free to send them in. I'll also just briefly add that in some sense, as like a larger extension of this, the Arizona Native Plant Society has recently contracted to publish a book on gardening with native plants of the Southwest with Timber Press, a publisher out of Portland, Oregon. But our book will, of course, be focused on the Southwest region. So that's something that will kind of take place over the course of the next couple of years, but do keep an eye out. That's something we'll be announcing a bit more about as we get a little further along. So that's all I have for you today. Again, if there's any questions specifically about the plant list, do feel free to ask them or put them in the chat. I'll be kind of in and out throughout the day and happy to answer any questions in the chat. So thank you so much.